Good afternoon, people of planet Earth and all other interdimensional entities. Today is Friday, the 13th of February 2026. Black Friday, on the eve of Valentine's Day. What could go wrong, people of Earth? Absolutely nothing. The time is, let me just check, 4:11 p.m. I've had a lovely day. I took advantage of the rain and the cooler temperature, much cooler temperature by the gods. It was a scorcher the last few days, but I took advantage. I felt called, and as I said in a video a few days ago, that I felt like going to the art gallery. I haven't been for over 2 years. So I felt kind of called to go there. Part of the reason being I had a really disturbing nightmare about my younger daughter Jasmine. I don't know why I'm dreaming of her. It's a bit astonishing. And I took a bit of a risk going to Goma today because my elder daughter Crystal works there and we're estranged. So that's part of the reason why I haven't gone. And since our estrangement in September 2023. But I took a bit of a risk thinking, oh well, the last time I spoke to Jared, he said she's in a show and she only works there 2 days a week. So I figured, oh, she's probably not working there today because just prior to the weekend is when you'd be getting ready for your show, one would think. But obviously that timetabling has changed, or Jared got the information wrong, whatever the case may be. So I arrived there after having a quite interesting spiritual encounter with, as it turned out, a lady that lives down the end of my street while waiting for the bus. So that was astonishing too. I'll talk about that later. So anyway, I arrive at the Goma Art Gallery, and as fate would have it, astonishingly, my daughter's sitting at the front reception, and she just sees me and goes, and then turns her gaze to the right to avoid making eye contact. You know, par for the course. Being ghosted by someone you grew in your own body is bit fucking awful, but if that's how she feels about me, there's nothing really I can do. I didn't go there to attempt to connect or have any kind of reconciliation anyway. I went there purely because I thought it was time I took myself out and went to the art gallery. It's good for me to see art and be immersed in culture and just have an outing. So anyway, I observed her avoid me, and I thought, oh well, that's how you want to be, and also it's her workplace, so I wasn't there to make any kind of scene, people of Earth, not that I would have, you know, because my mother used to turn up to my workplaces and make the most god-awful scenes, and I am not my mother, but yet I get treated as if I were, ironically. It's appalling. It's appalling being caught between two generations of putrescence. It's very appalling. But anyway, that's on them. I know my conscience is clear. I haven't done anything really, in real terms, to deserve how I've been treated, except have the misfortune of being cumulatively traumatised and landing in poverty. That's my crime, people. Oh, and getting old and getting health issues that go along with old age, that too. That's my one and only crime. Anyway, so I didn't let it get to me because she's entitled to feel how she feels, whatever delusion's going on in her mind about me. And so I marched straight over to the cloakroom because I knew I'd get hassled about my umbrella, because hello, it's raining. But I'd already been pulled up when I walked into the first art gallery, and I said I'm actually wanting to go to Goma anyway. So they made me walk out in the humidity and the rain, and all around the side of the building. It's all a bit draconian and insane, quite frankly. But anyway, I did that. So I went straight to the cloakroom and, you know, put my umbrella in the cloakroom so that everyone was sweet and copacetic and cooperative and collaborative. And then I saw there was an exhibition on, which I didn't even know there was an exhibition on, and it's on my concession card. It's $29. So I thought, you know what, I can just afford that. I had $21 in gold $2 and $1 coins, and so I went to the counter at the young lady that was taking the money for the exhibition. I said, will you accept coins? Because a lot of places don't accept cash now, you know, just draconian and digital ID enforcing and actually fucking insane. More about that later. So the young lass says, yes, I will accept coins. I said, okay, well, here's the situation. I have $21 in coins, but the ticket is $29, so I'll have to pay the other $8 from my card. She said, yes, we do split payments, that's fine. And then she had trouble getting her computer or machine to cooperate, had to call the other person over. So there was a lot of faffing about, but through nobody's fault. Just computers are like that, aren't they? Just faff about sometimes. Anyway, the second woman's looking at me like I'm some fucking alien, and I said, yes, I know I'm on a disability and I'm still trapped in childhood having to pay in coins, but you know, that's all the money I had on me, and I want to pay for this exhibition. So anyway, all got paid, split the payment for me, gave me my ticket. So I get into the exhibition, the very first room. Of course, I like to take photos of everything. I like to document everything just in case. I don't know why, actually, really. The exhibition's called Presence. I could have just been present and not documented anything. But I like to, you know, photograph the interesting artworks and video them. So anyway, and because the last time I was there at the art gallery, I got screamed at by some freaking staff member. It was extremely obnoxious because you're not allowed to have the flash on, and I didn't know how to turn off the flash. So all right, some of it is my old lady-itis and struggling with technology. So I thought, all right, to avoid any fracas, people of Earth, fracas, I approached the young, very nice, handsome-looking young man, very sweet man, staff member there, usher, and I asked him if he could help me to turn off my, you know, if he knew how to turn off my flash on my phone, because I don't want any dramas today. I particularly didn't want any dramas given my daughter works there and I look like her, and some of them kind of realise I'm her mother. Anyway, not that I said anything about being anyone's mother. I was just trying to fly under the feckin' radar, people of Earth. The Mama-T can fly under no radar. She is queen of her own destiny. So, and I really was trying not to be an asshole, you understand? I just wanted to just go with the flow. So anyway, the lovely young man was kind, said, yes, it's already off. So as far as I'm concerned, everything's fine, people of Earth. So I go around and I take photos and I look at everything. I don't just take photos, I actually do look, you know, I'm not just click, click, click out. So I studied things and took some time to look at things. Anyway, so I go into the next room, and the next room was this moving video that merges, and I thought, well, I want to video that. So I start videoing it, and I didn't realise, but my feckin' flash came on because I'm videoing. So a young woman, staff member, immediately steps forward, oh, you can't use your flash. And I said, look, I said, I was in the other room when I first started with this exhibition, and I asked the young man to help me turn off the flash. And I said, and he told me it was off. I said, so I just want to have a pleasurable, pleasant, comfortable experience. I haven't turned on the flash, I promise you. I don't know why it's turned on. She said, oh, well, perhaps it comes on when you do the video filming. Okay. So anyway, I said, look, would you kindly have a look at it, because I don't want to be constantly harassed about using the flash when I'm not trying to use the flash. I thought it was off. And she sort of looked at me, and I said, I'm not trying to be difficult. I said, but I haven't been for a few years, because the last time there was all this draconian insanity about everything, and I just want to come to the art gallery and enjoy the art without constant falling foul of, you know, the draconian rules they have. And she kind of just try not to laugh, because she can see I'm getting like fucking het up a bit, you know. I said, I'm not mad at you, I'm not trying to be obstreperous. I said, I just don't know why how this flash thing's happening. So anyway, she had a look at it, and she said, yes, for the video you have to turn this off as well, or whatever. I said, so then she said, go in where it's dark and start filming so we can check that it's off, which was kind of her, because I said, I don't want to repeat performance everywhere I go of it being a drama, you know. So anyway, it was indeed off, so end of dramas. So I'm like, oh, mama tears in the house. So, you know, I continue on with my experience, and I go into another room. There was a couple of my vintage there, and they were quite delightful looking at the exhibition too, and sitting down. And so I said to the wife, oh, you know, it's quite remarkable. It was like a big prismatic crystal, and it was throwing shadows all over the walls. It was quite lovely. And the husband concurred, and I said, I noticed your husband was particularly interested in the spinning rock. She said, yes, he loves rocks, she said, smiling gleefully, you know. And I said, oh yes, of course he does, because he's a geologist. I don't know what comes over me, how I just blurt these things out. It's like, he may not have been too. But anyway, just blurted it out. And then she looked at me in astonishment. She said, how did you know that? And I said, you said he loves rocks. It follows that he works at something he loves. He just looked at me a bit astonished too. So then I said to them, I said, I can't remember how it came up actually. I said, oh, do you work in the mine? He said, yes, I was working at Ravenswood. I said, oh, where's that? I've never heard of such a place. And he said, oh, it's out of Townsville. I said, oh, what kind of mine is it? And he said, it's a gold mine. And I said, I'd love to go to a gold mine, or to mines that mine precious stones like opals, or other precious stones. I said, I would find that so interesting. I said, but the trouble is I get gold fever. And he looked at me and smiled, and he said, something about, yes, well, gold is very valuable. And I said, oh no, it's not so much the value of it that sets me off, as I think it's the energy. Me all being witchy and woo-woo and esoteric and mystical, you understand. So he looks at me and he kind of shrinks into himself. Oh dear goddess, they won't want to talk to me now. They think I'm a nut. But I don't care. Geologists should understand these things about the energy that certain rocks and minerals give off, because they would be attuned to it too, consciously or unconsciously, especially when they work with it all the time. Maybe not, maybe if they're scientific materialists and have no connection to spirit, but some scientists are connected. I hope so anyway, dear goddess. Anywho, the wife then proceeds to tell me, she was very kind and indulgent of me, very sweet lady actually. She said, Ravenswood, she said, you would love it there. It's got the most beautiful architecture. She said, it's very, very charming place. So I said to her, I'd love to see it. I said, unfortunately, I've been in Brisbane for 37 years and I've been nowhere. I've seen very little of Australia. I said, it's actually a bit tragic, to be honest. So then they look at me a bit condescendingly, and reading as she's got no money, not quite worth talking to now. So anyway, they kind of drifted off, and I said, thank you for the lovely chat. It was very illuminating. Oh, the other thing they mentioned in the course of our little chat, their daughter is working up at Toowoomba and is quite astonished how cold it is up there. I said, oh, Toowoomba's very cold. I said, my daughter studied up there. It's a dreadfully cold place. And then the husband volunteered. He said, yes, he said, I've been up to the mine there. I said, oh, a gold mine? My eyes lighting up. He said, no, up near Oakey, he said, they mine coal. I said, that's interesting. I didn't know there were any mines up near Toowoomba. So you see the things you find out when you bother to be a little bit, you know, friendly and engage with other humans. So anyway, we sort of ended up following each other around a little bit around the exhibition, but I didn't try to act like we were friends or anything and engage with them any further. I just didn't think it was appropriate, but they were a very nice couple. I just saw them again when I stopped to have some chips and a cappuccino. So anyway, that experience was weird because just the man that works there is just so pretentious and obnoxious actually. He saw me come up to the counter and just standing there, and he just sees me waiting and he goes, just a minute, and then starts giving all these orders to the staff member, and he's me standing there like some kind of fucking goose, which I thought was incredibly poor customer service, rude beyond belief. And I'm containing my outrage, you know, because maybe it was important that he shows off how fabulous and how in charge he was and what a man he is in front of a customer like that. But I just find that obnoxious and gauche. But anyway, I'll calm your farm, Tanya. It's an outing and you need to sit down and have something to eat, because by the end of looking around all the exhibitions, I started getting waves of nausea, which I'm sure were partly spiritual, me picking up on my daughter's distress that I was even there. And I thought, no, fuck it, I need to eat now. And I looked at the time and it was around about 2 p.m. So I kind of did need to eat. So I'm holding my own as I do, like the queen of my own destiny. And he's been, you know, I thought he was quite unpleasant actually. But anyway, I thought, well, it's just so mad. It's not like I ever have to see it again, you know, like, can't be fun, Tanya. So then finally, after waving his arms around, bossing everyone around, and all the staff scurrying, like, oh, you pig. He says, how may I help you? I said, well, I would like a cappuccino and a bowl of fries, please. Small or large, he says, in this mincing, obnoxious, dripping, condescending way. I think he meant the cappuccino, but I wasn't sure if he meant the chips, so I'm looking at him like this, kind of confused. And then I realised, oh, he must mean the cappuccino. So I said, large, I said. And then mimicking his somewhat English accent, I said, all that and a bag of chips. No, all that and a bowl of chips. Anyway, the female staff member standing to the right of him was trying to contain her laughter, like she cracked up. And he's standing there like changing all sorts of colours, because I just thought, fuck you. You don't get to treat me rudely and get away with it, people are there. Anyway, the female stomach, her face changed colours too, but more out of mirth. You know, she loved it. He probably needed to be treated like that, actually, after being so, you know, authoritarian. So anyway, he takes my order and I pull out $25, $20 note, $5 note, which I had kept aside to pay for my meal, right? I paid cash and coins at the front counter for the exhibition, but I'd held on to the other cash because I knew I'd want to have a coffee and a meal. So he says, I'm going to ruin your day now, smirking, thinking his idea of, you know, revenge, ruin my fucking day. And I looked at him a bit astonished. I said, oh, really? He said, yes, we don't accept cash. Which, as I wrote about later, I thought was very odd because they accepted my coinage, which a lot of places don't like coins, at the front door at the exhibition, yet he doesn't want my cash. My folding money, my paper money. I'm like, oh, what fresh hell is this? So I look at him a bit astonished. The reason being, I had very little money left in my actual bank account, and I had cobbled together the cash I had from my little reserves, you know. The $25 was from money I put just the other day, actually, in my car in case of emergencies, and the $21 I had left over from all the nights when I was going to the club, drinking, paying cash. They would give me change in coins. So it builds up over time. So I cobbled all that together and I thought, fuck, I don't have enough money in my bank account now. I'll be overdrawn. Oh, fuck it, I don't care anymore. Fuck everything. You try to pay your way in cash and do the right thing, and your money's not good enough anymore, people of Earth. It's appalling. If I was in a really bad mood and I hadn't been so hungry and my feet hadn't hurt and I did need to sit down, I would have just said fuck it and walked off. But I thought, no, I really do want these chips and this cappuccino, even though I'm buying it from this awful, awful man. Thought he was quite awful. I have a feeling he served me before in another cafeteria they had. Anyway, it was a brand new cafe. I haven't been to this one before. It's all modernised and different. It was very nice. And the rest of the staff were nice, but he was awful. Awful man. He's probably a permanent bloody employee too. Oh, just makes your skin crawl to think about it. It's hard to fire permanent employees, people of Earth. Not that I want them fired, but there was just no need for that rudeness and condescension. Anyway, I thought, I'm not going to let you fucking ruin my day much as he'd like to. So I just said, okay. So I paid on my card, knowing that I would be overdrawn. And I pocketed my $25 and I went and got a seat, and I thought, you bastard. Because people don't expect you to be that close to the line, but, you know, that little bit of money will put you into the shit, people of Earth. It's evil, isn't it? It's evil. So anyway, but I said to him, I said, you've just contributed, I said, to the draconian digital ID regime in refusing cash. And he just sneered at me and said, it comes from the top. And I said, oh yes, this place is run by the government, isn't it? And off I toddled to have my meal. It was foul, it was foul. Probably won't go there again, it was that fucking foul. Anyway, while I was eating my chips, as I said, the other staff were friendly, brought me my meal and were polite and pleasant. I even had a chat to the female staff member that I made laugh about saying all that in a bowl of chips. But while I was eating my chips, or fries as they're called in American parlance, these two pigeons got up on the table where I was sitting, and I just went, no, Not you either. There'll be no annoyances today. Very well-manneredly, both pigeons looked at me and sort of nodded and backed off. Didn't even try and take my chips, which I was a bit surprised about, quite frankly. Kermie, there's some very well-behaved pigeons out there. When the mama-T tells them to behave, they listen. I must speak bird now. What do you say to that, Bo? He says, yes, it's because you smell like birds, and they probably could tell, and they didn't want to piss you off in case you were came from a species of bird that might wring their bloody neck. No, or I wouldn't. I love birds. But it's cute how birds interact with me and how I speak to them, and they kind of connect with me better than my fellow Homo sapiens sapiens, or what used to be Homo sapiens sapiens by all the gods. It's very terrifying. Very terrifying, I have to say about that. Anyway, so I sat there quietly and had my chips and took a photo of the vista across the river. The river was a turgid, morose, ugly looking brown because of the rain, and it was all sort of baby pooed brownish yellow. It was quite ugly today, but you know, you got to go with all the rain. It stirs up all the silt, and so there is that. And I took a photograph of the old stomping ground where I used to dance for 12 years, the old Treasury building. And I just glanced over at the new Treasury building and I thought, oh yes, that's the place where the music technician said I'm not 5-star enough to go to. Fuck you. I didn't even take a photo of that ugly monstrosity, quite frankly. Just looks like a giant bloody vulva. A hole where fools throw their money in and enrich the Queensland government, who then puts draconian measures on you like digital ID after they've raped you of every last penny, and then won't even take your cash. I'm livid a little bit still, but I'll let it go. Apart from that, it didn't ruin my day. I had a lovely day. I'm glad I went out. Now back to my encounter with the lady at the bus stop. So I get to the bus stop with my umbrella. It's raining, you know. It's not cold, it's just wet. And I go into a panic mode because I've missed the 180 bus, and the next bus is the 185, which doesn't go to where I needed to go, and I started to kind of panic. Anyway, this elderly Filipina lady walks up, and she seemed vaguely familiar, but I didn't know from where, and she sees me, oh, hello. Anyway, we started chatting. It's a bit awkward that I didn't recognise her because she literally lives down the end of my street. Anyway, we start chatting, and she said that she was feeling a bit stressed because she'd missed the 180, and I said, oh, there'll be another one. I said, do you happen to know if the 185 stops at the cultural centre? She said, no, it goes in a different direction. I said, right, so I definitely need the 180. She said, yes. I said, thanks for that information. I said, because I get very nervous when I'm taking public transport. And anyway, so we start chatting, and she tells me her name is Magdalena, and I said, that's a very pretty name. And I admired, she had a beautiful gold pendant that had a picture of, you know, the Mother Mary, Jesus' Virgin Mother. So I said, tell her that's a lovely pendant you've got on. She said, oh, thank you. She said, it used to have another thing on top of it, but I lost it. I didn't even realise that underneath it has the picture engraved of the Mother Mary. So she said, I still wear it because it's, you know, quite lovely, even though it's lost part of it. I said, that's fine. And I looked her deep into her eyes and I said, are you Christian or Catholic by any chance? Because usually if people wear Mary, they're usually Catholic. She said, yes. I said, oh, you must be quite religious. She says, yes, I'm going to church in the city. I like to go for the Mass on a Friday afternoon, and I go on a Wednesday as well. And I'm thinking, oh, you know, that's lovely. And so I said to her, oh, you know, that's lovely. And then we got talking. She said, when we first came here, she said, to Brisbane, we lived in Caloundra, but we were only there a few years. And she said, and then we moved to Green Slopes, and then we bought a house here, just down the road. And I said, oh, I live in, you know, the street that I live in. And she said, I live in that street too. And I looked at her, I thought, my goodness, I didn't actually recognise the lady. She sometimes walks past my house. I should have recognised her. I don't know what's wrong with me that I'm not recognising people. It's a bit odd, So I thought, oh well, you know, I've never really had a conversation with her before. Anyway, and then she mentions that her husband just died in November, and her husband was an awful man. He was so vicious to me years ago when I had 2 little dogs and I was having surgery, and he complained about my dogs barking and being vicious, and because of him I had to give away one of the lovely dogs. And of course I'd just come home from major surgery, so this was back in 2007, completely wrecked from that horrendous surgery, which took me 2 years to recover from fully. And then I had all that upset about my dogs because of her husband. But anyway, I thought, you know, that was in 2007. The man's dead. Am I going to go on about it? No. It's a long time ago. So I just looked at her and I thought, oh yes, you were married to that bastard, I thought. I didn't say that to her, of course. But I said to her, I'm not sure how it came up, but I said, oh, you know, I'm nearly 61. She said, are you? She says, I'm 16 years older than you. Looking a bit surprised, because quite frankly, apart from her wrinkles around her eyes, I look older than her. You know, it's a bit astonishing. So anyway, but, you know, this is the thing with women, not every woman's generalisation really, but a lot of women from Asian countries tend to look younger than us white women. I don't know, it must be their better diet, or they take better care of their skin, or I don't know what the reason is. But anyway, I thought that's, you know, quite astonishing. She looks so much younger. Like, she looked like my age, which she's 16 years older than me. She'd be 77. Didn't look older than 60. So I said to her, sort of blurted it out, I said, you look very fresh, darling. And she said, oh yes, my husband died in November. And I said, oh, that explains it. She gives me a bit of a strange look. I said, oh, I'm terribly sorry for your loss. And I'm thinking, no, you're not. That old bastard was a horrible fucking man, you know. Maybe not to her. She stayed married to him for 44 years, but he was a nasty man. But anyway, so I just said, oh, I said, that's why you look so fresh. And she's looking a bit astonished. I said, oh, I don't mean offence, I said, but even happily married women, when their husbands die after long marriages, they kind of blossom. I said, my mother-in-law had been married to my father-in-law for 46 years, and when he died, she just bloomed. She had the cheeks of a young woman. She just looked so like a renaissance of a reinvigoration. And then she kind of understood that I wasn't trying to be offensive. I was just saying, so I said to her, I'm sorry for your loss. It's very hard to lose a family member, especially when you've been married such a long time. I said, but on the other hand, I said, I'm happy for your emancipation. She just looked at me. She has no idea that I had reason to suspect that he was a bollocking awful bastard, right? I said, did you ever have children? She said, no, we didn't have any children. I said, I understand. But she said she worked for 36 years as a support worker in hospitals. So she said, I'm only newly retired. I said, oh, well, that's good. It's good that you're retired, can enjoy life now. And I said, isn't it nice? I said, being able to get up in the morning whenever you feel like getting up and go to bed when you feel like going to bed and not having to be, following anyone else's directives and just flowing through life at your own pace. She said, it's so nice not having to get up early every morning. My husband expected that every morning. And she looked at me and I went, yes. I said, isn't freedom lovely? And I'm trying to hold back because I don't want to upset her, Anyway, the bus came and she said, bye, Tanya. I said, bye. And I sat somewhere else because she chose a seat where there's only one person. I would have sat with him, but I thought, oh well, I've done it now, reminding a widow that she should be happy in her emancipation. It's a bit of a faux pas, but I happen to know for a fact how emancipating it is when you've been with a right bollocking bastard of a control freak all your life to finally have that level of freedom. And she said to me, you look very fresh too with the flower in your hair. And I was like, oh, thank you, Wow. Anyway, so that's my story about today's outing. I was going to continue reading this, but this is a 37-minute video. But yes, apart from the awkwardness of my daughter not wanting to even say hello to me and not engaging, not being welcoming, par for the course, and the the mincing, condescending, obnoxious behaviour of the man in the little cop bistro there. I had quite a lovely time talking to that other couple and looking at everything, and the other staff members were friendly, so there was that. So I had an outing today. But yes, a bit concerned about the nightmares that I've been having about my younger daughter, but I'm sure they're just old trauma memories being regurgitated, as I call it, being vomited out by my subconscious, and I'm sure everything's fine. And if they weren't fine, my daughters want nothing to do with me, so they're not going to communicate with me. So whether they're fine or not fine, they'll just carry on with their lives and continue coping and managing the best way they can, just like I've been left to do for the past few years. And it is what it is, people of Earth, and no sense being upset about it or angry or exercised in any way. Just move through life one day at a time. But yes, I still have to take my boots off. My feet actually do hurt. So I'll be back. I'll make another video. I'll call this Musings about, I don't know what I'll call it. I'll have to think what I'll call this video. But anyway, take good care, people of Earth. I'll be back shortly for the actual reading of Chapter 5, Cuttlefish and Cabs.